The net proceeds will be used to benefit all victims of the war, and it is not clear if he means by that Russian victims as well as Ukrainians. Jonathan Swain is at Stanford. We're getting some breaking news this morning. There had been some controversy that athletes from Russia and Belarus would be allowed to compete as neutrals at the Paralympics, which begin in Beijing tomorrow. The International Paralympic Committee had said that the two countries would compete under the Paralympic flag and not be included in the medal table. Well, they have performed a reversal. Those athletes from Russia and Belarus will now be banned from the Winter Paralympic Games for their country's role in the war in Ukraine, according to the International Paralympic Committee today. So they have responded to the criticism, and there had been a debate about whether countries like Britain should boycott the Paralympics. We're getting some breaking news this morning. There had been some controversy that athletes from Russia and Belarus would be allowed to compete as neutrals at the Paralympics, which begin in Beijing tomorrow. The International Paralympic Committee had said that the two countries would compete under the Paralympic flag and not be included in the medal table. Well, they have performed a reversal. Those athletes from Russia and Belarus will now be banned from the Winter Paralympic Games for their country's role in the war in Ukraine, according to the International Paralympic Committee today. So they have responded to the criticism, and there had been a debate about whether countries like Britain should boycott the Paralympics. Russian and Belarusian athletes would be allowed to compete. But now it looks like they have performed an about-turn.
Yeah.
Athletes will not now.
The IPC President, Andrew Parsons, said that in the last 12 hours, an overwhelming number of members have been in touch with us. They have told us that if we do not reconsider our decision, it is now likely to have grave consequences. What is clear is that the rapidly escalating situation has now put us in a unique and impossible position so close to the start of the Games.
It's a bit like FIFA, isn't it, with the World Cup?
And the playoffs.
Yeah.
That eventually they bowed to the pressure that came from the other nations rather than actually taking that decision themselves. We're going to be discussing this with Paralympian Richard Whitehead and also Ali Jawad, who is Richard is a runner and Ali is a power lifter. And of course, the decision for those Paralympians from Russia and Belarus is that they have trained, they've had the opportunity to go there. And actually, an interesting aside to that is the way that disability is seen, particularly in Russia. Disability isn't often seen in Russia. They don't make a point of showing them. So these would have been a great opportunity for those Paralympic athletes from those countries to go out and perform on an international stage under a neutral flag. However, one of the concerns from the athletes, of course, and the Paralympic athletes, was that in the Winter Olympics, the countries, the Russians are under a neutral flag anyway, but they still managed to adorn themselves on the podiums with Russian flags. Around the Olympic Village, there were Russian flags everywhere. So it would have been a visible symbol for the Ukrainian athletes to have to face. And that was something that clearly the other nations managed to get the IPC to change their minds. That's quite a turnaround, though. I mean, it starts tomorrow. They've got the opening ceremony in Beijing tomorrow.
They will already be there, the Paralympians, so what happens to them now? Yeah, but it looks like the threat of the boycott from other countries
has forced their hand,
that change of mind, yeah. All right, discussing that in a few minutes. Here's Kate with the rest of the day's news.
It's going to be prey to hold-ups.
Humanitarian crisis now. There's 1 million people leaving Ukraine, desperately seeking sanctuary in the countries around, hoping at some point to go back home. People here desperately thinking, what can we do to help? You know, close to me in South London, the Polish White Eagle Club opened up to take in supplies, and there were queues all the way down the high street outside, people thinking, well, if I can just take some clothes, maybe that will help. It was interesting, the person organising that appeal said, actually, sometimes those things you think might help don't. So the Disasters Emergency Committee will know exactly what's needed and where.
We hope.
Keys in a week is a huge number. I think we were told, weren't we, yesterday, that the rules are unleashed here in the UK. There will be people that are just desperate for some sort of safe haven and
decent values. And one of those is hospitality to...
I think that's absolutely right, but I do think we urgently need a change in our policy here. It's still...
Very much indeed. Quentin and Sonia are staying with us this morning. Civilian deaths in Ukraine have passed 2,000. And as we've been discussing, more than 1 million as the bombardment continues, and children over in Russia being detained by police. So we're going to discuss this morning how you can talk to children about the reality of war, if that is something that you're struggling with at home. That's coming up after the break.
you watching Good Morning Britain on ITV.
See you in a moment.
Welcome back. We're still joined by political sketch writer from The Times, Quentin Letts, by Observer writer Sonia Soda, and also the Reverend Steve Chalk has joined us. He runs... But to have you here today in the studio is fantastic, not least because as the sort of leader of a number of schools and academies across the country, you will have first-hand experience and understanding of how...
It means you've got to provide somewhere where young people can... It means you've got to provide somewhere where young people can... Kids talk. What we're doing, actually, and top of all of that, tomorrow, we're doing...
Schools can be a place, as you say, to discuss these issues. Quentin, schools can also be a place where propists will not now be allowed to compete at the Winter Paralympics in Beijing, which open tomorrow following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Patrick Fock is in Beijing. Patrick, will not now be allowed to compete at the Winter Paralympics in Beijing, which open tomorrow following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Patrick Fock is in Beijing. Patrick, the